A businessman left his wife and 2 children in a small village, claiming they were holding him back. Years later, he saw her on television receiving an award for her successful business and for rescuing children during a severe winter. He wept, with remorse. Welcome back. Leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel and enjoy the story. The bitter cold of winter pierced through the small rural cottage as Natalia watched her husband Boris pack his bags. The wind howled outside, matching the storm brewing within their once peaceful home in the outskirts of Krakow. Their 2 children, 5-year-old Alina and 3-year-old Marek, slept peacefully in the adjacent room, blissfully unaware that their lives were about to change forever. "You and these children are nothing but a burden," Boris spat, tossing a handful of zloty onto the worn wooden table. The meager amount would barely last them a week. "I deserve better than this life." Natalia stood frozen, her hands trembling as she clutched the doorframe for support. "How can you say that? We are your family. We can work through this together." Boris sneered as he zipped his suitcase closed. "I've been offered a position in Warsaw. A real opportunity with real people, not stuck in this backwater village with a wife who can barely read and 2 screaming brats." His words cut deeper than the winter chill. Natalia had sacrificed her own education to support Boris through university, working multiple jobs while caring for their growing family. Now at 32, she was being discarded like yesterday's newspaper. "What about the children? They need their father," she pleaded, trying one last time to reach the man she had once loved so deeply. "They'll be better off without me dragging them down," he replied without emotion. "I was never meant for this small-town life. I need more Natalia, something you could never understand." With those cruel words hanging in the frosty air, he walked out the door, leaving behind a devastated wife and 2 small children in the remote village where opportunities were as scarce as warmth in January. The sound of his car engine faded into the distance, taking with it the security and stability Natalia had fought so hard to maintain. That fateful morning marked the beginning of a remarkable journey that would transform a heartbroken woman into one of Poland's most respected business leaders and philanthropists. Left with barely enough money to last the month and 2 hungry children looking to her with frightened eyes, she collapsed onto the kitchen floor, allowing herself exactly 1 hour to cry before rising with newfound determination. When Alina and Marek woke, they found their mother at the kitchen table, her eyes red but dry, a notebook open before her as she meticulously counted their remaining funds and wrote out a plan. They asked for their father, and Natalia summoned the strength to explain that Papa had gone away for work, and that they would be just fine without him. She promised herself that this would not be a lie. The abandoned mother immediately took inventory of her skills. Having grown up helping her grandmother create traditional Polish wool blankets and clothing, she possessed exceptional talent with textiles that had been overshadowed by her role as wife and mother. That very evening, after putting the children to bed with extra stories and reassurances, she gathered scraps of fabric from around the house and began crafting small decorative items that showcased traditional Polish folk art patterns. Her grandmother's voice seemed to guide her hands as she worked through the night, remembering techniques passed down through generations. By morning, she had created a small collection of colorful Wekinanki paper cutouts and embroidered handkerchiefs. Though her eyes burned from exhaustion, a spark of hope had ignited in her heart. Within weeks, she was selling her handmade goods at the local market, earning just enough to keep food on the table. Each morning, she would rise before dawn to prepare meals for the day, then bundle up her children and walk the kilometer to her cousin's house, where the children could stay while she sold her wares. The neighboring women, many themselves struggling with financial hardship, began to notice her industriousness. Impressed by her determination, several offered to watch her children during market days, creating an informal support network that would prove invaluable. "How do you manage, Natalia?" asked Pani Weronika, an elderly widow who lived next door. "Your husband leaves you with nothing, yet here you are fighting like a lioness for your cubs." Natalia threaded her needle carefully before responding. "What choice do I have? I will not let my children suffer for his selfishness." As winter deepened, so did Natalia's resolve. She expanded her product line to include small stuffed animals made from leftover fabric, each one embellished with traditional Polish designs. The tourists who occasionally passed through the village were particularly drawn to these unique souvenirs, allowing her to charge slightly more than she could to locals. If you're enjoying the story, type 5 in the comments and subscribe for more videos like this. If not, type 0. It helps me create even better content for you. Continuing. The small successes at the market gave Natalia confidence, but the harsh reality of her situation became painfully clear when Alina developed a high fever and persistent cough as January gave way to February. The local clinic was understaffed, and the doctor examined the child with obvious impatience. "She needs antibiotics," he declared, scribbling a prescription, "and proper nutrition. She's underweight." Natalia's heart sank as she looked at the price of the medication. It would consume all her savings, leaving nothing for rent or food. When she hesitated, the doctor's expression hardened. "I need payment up front," he said coldly. "Too many people in this village promise to pay later and never return." "Please," Natalia whispered, holding Alina's burning body close. "She's just a child. I'll pay you, I swear it. I just need a few days." The doctor shook his head. "Rules are rules. Come back when you have the money." With nowhere else to turn, Natalia bundled her feverish daughter back into her coat and carried her through the snow to the village elder's home. Pan Kazimierz had known Natalia since she was a child, had even attended her wedding to Boris years ago. The old man welcomed them in from the cold and listened gravely as Natalia explained her situation. When she finished, he studied her face, weathered beyond its years by recent hardship. "I could give you the money," he said slowly, "but that would solve only today's problem. Tomorrow will bring new ones." Natalia nodded, understanding the wisdom in his words. "I'm not asking for charity, Pan Kazimierz. I'm asking for an opportunity." She explained her unusual proposition. She would craft 30 ornate wool blankets for the upcoming village festival if he would cover the medical costs. The festival, celebrating the end of winter, was less than a month away and attracted visitors from surrounding communities. 30 blankets. The elder's bushy eyebrows rose in surprise. "That's impossible. Even with help, you couldn't manage so many in such a short time." "I can do it," Natalia insisted, determination burning in her eyes. "My grandmother taught me shortcuts that don't compromise quality. I just need the materials." Moved by her dedication, he agreed, but privately doubted her ability to fulfill such a large order. Nevertheless, he gave her the money for Alina's medicine, and enough woolen supplies to begin her ambitious project. The following weeks tested Natalia's endurance like never before. During the day, she cared for her recovering daughter and active son. At night, after tucking them into bed, she worked by the light of a single lamp, her fingers flying over the wool as she created intricate patterns inspired by the landscapes and folklore of her homeland. Working through the nights after her children were asleep, her fingers blistered and raw, she not only completed the 30 blankets, but added unique embellishments that reflected the history of the village. Each blanket told a story, from the founding of the village centuries ago to the resilience of its people through wars and hardships. When Pan Kazimierz came to check on her progress a week before the festival, he stood speechless in the doorway of her small cottage. The blankets were laid out on every available surface, their vibrant colors and patterns transforming the humble space into an art gallery. "This is," he began, at a loss for words. "Natalia, this is extraordinary." She smiled tiredly, her hands wrapped in thin bandages to protect her cracked skin. "My grandmother always said that when we create with love, we create something magical." The festival attendees were enchanted by her creations, and orders began pouring in from neighboring communities. This unexpected success allowed her to purchase a small second-hand sewing machine, dramatically increasing her productivity. With the machine, she could complete in hours what had previously taken days. As spring thawed the frozen landscape, Natalia's business began to bloom alongside the first flowers. She had transformed their small living room into a workshop, with Alina and Marek often playing nearby, occasionally helping by sorting buttons or holding yarn. They had adapted to their new life without their father, though Marek sometimes still cried for him at night. Word of Natalia's exceptional craftwork spread across the region, carried by satisfied customers who praised not only the quality of her work, but the heart evident in every stitch. 3 months after Boris's departure, a representative from a regional tourism board visited the village. The woman, dressed in a sleek city suit that made the villagers stare, sought out Natalia's humble stall at the market. "These pieces," she said, examining a delicately embroidered table runner, "they capture something authentic that our tourists crave, something real about Poland that they can't find in the mass-produced souvenirs in Warsaw or Krakow." Recognition of the authentic cultural value of her pieces led to a modest contract to supply gift items for tourists visiting the historic sites in nearby cities. The order was larger than anything Natalia had handled before, too much for one person working alone. This challenge prompted her to recruit 5 other women from the village who needed income, teaching them her grandmother's techniques and paying them fairly for their work. Most were like her, single mothers or widows struggling to make ends meet. Together they formed a small but determined team. The local priest, Father Tomasz, noticed their cramped working conditions when he visited to bless Natalia's new venture. Seeing how her business was bringing hope to women who had few options, he offered the use of an unused building on church property, a former school that had closed years ago as young families left the village for opportunities in the cities. With a proper workspace, Natalia could organize production more efficiently. She set up different stations for cutting, sewing, embroidery, and quality control. Each woman specialized in what she did best, creating a smooth workflow that increased their output without sacrificing quality. What began as a desperate means of survival evolved into a growing cooperative of rural women artisans. 18 months after her husband's departure, Natalia secured a small business loan to properly renovate their workspace and purchase additional equipment. The bank manager had initially been skeptical, but the growing stack of orders from reputable tourism companies convinced him to take a chance on her. By the time Alina started school, the cooperative had grown to include 12 women each, bringing unique skills and perspectives to the team. They named their business Babcia's Legacy, honoring the grandmothers who had preserved these traditional crafts through generations of hardship. Will you succeed against all odds like Natalia, or will you give up when faced with adversities? Share this video with someone who needs inspiration right now. The cooperative's reputation for quality and cultural authenticity continued to grow throughout Poland. However, success brought new challenges. Established textile companies viewed her rural operation as unsophisticated and attempted to block her products from major urban markets, spreading rumors about poor quality and unreliable delivery. Natalia refused to be intimidated. When a FICT, prestigious folk art exhibition in Krakow, rejected their application, citing lack of professional credentials, she personally traveled to the city with samples of their finest work. After being turned away by secretaries and assistants, she waited outside the director's office until closing time. 5 minutes, she said, when the surprised director emerged. Give me 5 minutes to show you what we can do. Her persistence paid off. The director, impressed by both her determination and the quality of her work, not only included Babcia's Legacy in the exhibition, but gave them a prime location near the entrance. The exposure led to their first international orders from a German tour company specializing in cultural experiences. When a particularly harsh winter struck the region 3 years after Boris's departure, the roads to the village were blocked for weeks, threatening to ruin the business as orders went unfulfilled. Delivery trucks couldn't reach them, and they couldn't transport finished products to their distributors. Rather than surrendering to circumstances, Natalia leveraged the traditional Polish resilience she had instilled in her team. Using social media skills Alina had taught her, she began documenting their struggle against the winter elements, sharing stories of the artisans and the cultural significance of their work. "We are snowed in," she wrote in their first post, accompanied by photos of their workshop surrounded by snowdrifts taller than a person. "But our hands and hearts remain warm and busy, like our ancestors who created beauty even in the harshest, conditions we continue our work. When the road's clear, we will have treasures to share with the world. The authentic narrative resonated with people across Poland and beyond, creating unexpected international interest in their products. Orders poured in faster than they could fulfill them, especially after a popular travel blogger shared their story with her million followers. As the cooperative expanded to include 30 women from surrounding villages, Natalia implemented a profit-sharing model that ensured every artisan benefited from their success. She established a community childcare center, where the older women of the village could earn income by looking after the children while their mothers worked. This innovative solution addressed a critical need in the community, while honoring the knowledge of the elderly residents. The success of Babcia's legacy began to transform the village itself. Houses that had stood empty for years were renovated as families moved back, attracted by the employment opportunities. The local school, which had been at risk of closing due to declining enrollment, welcomed new students, including Marek, who started first grade with a classroom full of peers rather than the half-empty class that had been projected. 4 years after being abandoned, Natalia's business attracted the attention of a prestigious national business competition focusing on rural entrepreneurship. Despite being significantly underfunded compared to other contestants, her presentation about transforming traditional crafts into sustainable livelihoods earned her not only the top prize, but also crucial connections to international markets. The judges were particularly impressed by her commitment to authentic methods and materials. While competitors talked about modernizing traditional crafts to make them more commercially viable, Natalia spoke passionately about preserving the cultural heritage embodied in every stitch and pattern. "We don't change our crafts to suit the market," she explained during her presentation. "We invite the market to appreciate the beauty of our traditions. Each piece tells a story centuries in the making. Our grandmothers created these patterns as a form of language, expressing hopes, dreams, and history when other forms of expression were forbidden." The cooperative's sudden prominence brought unexpected challenges. Larger companies attempted to copy their designs without acknowledging their cultural roots, producing cheaper versions that undermined both the artistry and the livelihood of the artisans. Banking institutions that had previously denied Natalia loans now offered predatory financing options, trying to capitalize on her success while creating dependency. Through careful negotiation and by emphasizing the authentic heritage of their products, she successfully defended the cooperative's unique position in the market. She registered their traditional patterns as intellectual property, not to prevent others from using them, but to ensure proper attribution to the cultural heritage they represented. As Babcia's legacy approached its 5th anniversary, Natalia found herself leading an enterprise that employed over 50 women, supported numerous families, and had revitalized a dying village. Alina, now 10, and Marek, 8, had grown into confident, compassionate children who understood the value of hard work and community. They spent their afternoons after school in the workshop, learning the skills that had saved their family. During a particularly brutal winter storm that left many regional villages isolated, she organized an emergency response using the cooperative's delivery vehicles to transport essential supplies to elderly residents. The idea came after she received a distressed call from an artisan in a neighboring village who couldn't reach her elderly parents. "We have vans, we have strong people, and we know these back roads better than anyone," Natalia told her team. "We can help." What began as a rescue mission for one family expanded as they discovered other vulnerable residents, particularly the elderly who lived alone and families with young children who had inadequate heating or supplies. Recognizing that children were especially vulnerable during these harsh conditions, Natalia established a temporary shelter in the workshop where families without adequate heating could find warmth and meals. The cooperative's women took shifts, cooking massive pots of bigos and żurek, traditional Polish stews perfect for warming bodies and spirits. They converted the storage room into a dormitory with the blankets they normally sold, creating a colorful sanctuary from the howling storm outside. This humanitarian effort, undertaken without fanfare or publicity, saved dozens of lives during the worst blizzard in decades. Only when a national news crew arrived to cover the storm's aftermath did Natalia's quiet heroism become public knowledge. The reporter, stranded in the village when her crew's vehicle got stuck, witnessed firsthand the operation Natalia had organized. While officials in Warsaw were still debating emergency response protocols, this remarkable woman had already mobilized her community, the reporter stated during a live broadcast. What began as a small business has become the heart of a region, proving that economic success and human compassion can go hand in hand. The unexpected media attention brought Natalia's face into living rooms across the country, including that of her estranged husband. Boris, who had found moderate success in Warsaw but none of the fulfillment he had expected, watched in stunned silence as his ex-wife confidently explained their emergency response strategy to the nation. Have you or someone you know ever experienced a transformation like Natalia's, turning adversity into opportunity? Share your thoughts in the comments below. By this point, Babcia's legacy had grown into a nationally recognized brand that celebrated Polish cultural heritage while providing sustainable income for over 50 rural families. The community that had once barely survived now thrived with renewed purpose, attracting young families back to a village that had been slowly dying from emigration. The sudden national attention brought a flood of new opportunities. A major department store in Warsaw offered Natalia prime retail space for a Babcia's legacy boutique. An international craft magazine requested a feature article on their traditional techniques. Tourism companies began including the workshop as a stop on cultural tours of the region. With growth came growing pains. Natalia struggled to maintain the cooperative's community-focused values while meeting increasing demand. She refused to compromise on quality or authenticity, even when it meant turning down lucrative contracts that would have required mass production techniques. Our strength comes from our connection to tradition and to each other, she reminded her team during a tense meeting where they debated whether to accept a major order from a foreign corporation. If we lose that, we become just another factory. Her leadership style, blending compassion with pragmatism, inspired fierce loyalty among the artisans. When larger companies tried to recruit her most skilled workers with promises of higher wages, not a single woman left the cooperative. They understood that what they were building together was worth more than money alone. 5 years after Boris walked out, Natalia received an invitation that would change her life once again. The president's office contacted her about a newly established award honoring Poles who demonstrated exceptional entrepreneurship and social responsibility. Babcia's legacy had been nominated, and Natalia was asked to attend a ceremony in Warsaw. She almost declined. The thought of returning to the city where Boris had disappeared into a new life made her stomach churn. But Alina and Marek convinced her to go. "You've worked so hard, Mama," Alina said, helping her mother select an outfit for the ceremony. "The whole country should know what you've done." Marek nodded in agreement. "And we want to ride in a fancy hotel elevator," he added with a grin. The night of the ceremony found Natalia in an elegant black dress, embellished with traditional Polish embroidery created by her own artisans. She had insisted on bringing 5 other women from the cooperative to share in the honor, refusing to perpetuate the myth of the solo entrepreneur when her success had been built on collective effort. While accepting the prestigious national award for her humanitarian efforts during the winter crisis, she shared the stage with government officials and business leaders, a far cry from the desperate woman crying on her kitchen floor 5 years earlier. The auditorium fell silent as she stepped to the microphone, the first recipient from a rural background in the award's history. "This recognition doesn't belong to me alone," she began, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "It belongs to every woman in our cooperative who believed we could create something meaningful together. To my children, Alina and Marek, who gave me a reason to fight when surrender seemed easier. And to our village, which reminded me that true wealth isn't measured in zloty but in human connection." Her grace and humility during the televised ceremony captured the nation's heart as she dedicated the award to her children and the women of her cooperative. The cameras captured tears in the eyes of the president as she described how traditional skills passed down through generations of Polish women had saved not just her family, but an entire community. Unknown to Natalia, Boris watched the ceremony from his apartment in Warsaw, tears streaming down his face as he witnessed the remarkable woman she had become. The confident business leader accepting accolades bore little resemblance to the dependent wife he had abandoned. The years had been less kind to him, the promising position had led nowhere, and a series of failed relationships had left him lonely and regretful. The following day, as Natalia prepared to return home, the hotel receptionist handed her an envelope. Inside was a letter from Boris asking to meet. After 5 years of silence, he claimed to be filled with remorse and wished to make amends. He included his phone number and address, suggesting dinner at an expensive restaurant near her hotel. Natalia's hands trembled as she read his words. For a moment, the old pain threatened to resurface, but she took a deep breath and tucked the letter into her purse. Later, she asked the hotel concierge for directions to a nearby park where she sat on a bench and composed a careful response. His subsequent attempts to reconnect through letters were met with kind but firm responses, making it clear that while she had forgiven him, her life had moved forward without him. She did not agree to meet, explaining that she saw no purpose in reopening old wounds. Her final letter to him included a recent photo of Alina and Marek, with permission for him to contact them directly when they were older, if they wished. "The children deserve to know their father," she wrote, "but that must be their choice, not mine or yours. They know you left us, but they also know that people can change. If you have truly changed, prove it by respecting my boundaries now." What will happen when Natalia finally confronts Boris? Will she forgive him or reject him forever? Keep watching to find out. As the 5th anniversary of his departure approached, Natalia gathered the cooperative members to announce her most ambitious plan yet, establishing a training academy to preserve traditional Polish textile arts while teaching business skills to women from underprivileged backgrounds. The initiative would ensure that cultural heritage remained vibrant while creating pathways to independence for future generations of women. "Many of us know what it means to have no options," she told the assembled women. "We've felt the desperation of not knowing how we would feed our children tomorrow. This academy will be a lighthouse for women lost in that darkness." The plan was ambitious, requiring significant investment. Natalia proposed allocating 30% of their profits toward creating the academy, which would provide both residential and online courses. The vote to approve was unanimous. Construction began on a building adjacent to their workshop, designed to harmonize with the traditional architecture of the village while incorporating modern educational facilities. Women from across Poland applied for the first training cohort, their applications often containing heartbreaking stories of domestic violence, economic hardship, and dreams deferred. Natalia personally reviewed each application, remembering her own desperation 5 years earlier. She selected 30 women for the inaugural class, ensuring diversity in age, background, and region. The oldest student was a 60-year-old widow who had never worked outside her home. The youngest was a 19-year-old mother fleeing an abusive relationship. The academy curriculum balanced traditional crafts with modern business skills. Students learned not only embroidery and weaving, but also accounting, marketing, and digital literacy. Guest instructors included successful businesswomen from Warsaw and Krakow, many of whom volunteered their time after learning about the academy's mission. 6 months into the academy's operation, Natalia received a call from a television producer who wanted to feature Babcia's legacy in a documentary series about innovative Polish businesses. The resulting hour-long program followed several students through their transformation, interspersed with Natalia's own story of rebuilding her life after abandonment. The documentary aired on primetime national television, drawing record viewership. Social media exploded with praise for the cooperatives model, which viewers contrasted favorably with exploitative fast fashion practices making headlines at the time. Orders for their products increased tenfold overnight, crashing their website. Among the many messages that flooded their inbox after the broadcast was one from a lawyer representing a major international retailer known for its commitment to ethical sourcing. They proposed a partnership that would bring Babcia's legacy products to stores across Europe and North America, with guarantees preserving their production methods and fair compensation. After careful consideration and consultation with the cooperative's members, Natalia accepted the offer with specific conditions. Production would remain in their village, expansion would happen gradually to maintain quality, and a percentage of international sales would support the academy. The retailer, impressed by her clear boundaries, agreed to her terms. The international expansion created both opportunities and pressures. To meet increased demand without compromising their values, Natalia established satellite cooperatives in neighboring villages, each led by a graduate of their academy. This network approach preserved the intimate, community-based production model while allowing them to scale up sustainably. As Babsia's legacy products appeared in upscale stores from Berlin to Tokyo, the village that had once been marked for economic extinction became a case study in rural revitalization. Government officials and development experts visited regularly, hoping to replicate their success in other struggling communities. Natalia remained grounded despite her growing influence. She continued to work alongside her artisans, taking her turn sweeping the workshop floor and making coffee for the team. Her home, while now renovated and comfortable, remained modest. Her greatest indulgence was ensuring her children had educational opportunities she had been denied, including music lessons, language tutoring, and summer camps. 6 years after Boris's departure, as Natalia prepared for a business trip to present at an international conference on women's economic empowerment, she received news that Boris had been hospitalized after a serious car accident. Though their divorce had been finalized years ago, she was still listed as his emergency contact. He had never updated the information. The hospital was in Warsaw, a city she now visited regularly for business, but still associated with painful memories. After ensuring the cooperative could manage without her for a few extra days, she took Alina and Marek to the city, explaining truthfully that their father was ill and they would visit him. "Will he recognize us?" Marek asked anxiously as they approached the hospital. At 9 years old, he had few memories of the father who had left when he was 3. "Of course he will," Natalia assured him, though she wasn't certain. "You're his children." The reunion was awkward but healing. Boris, humbled by both his injuries and the sight of his thriving family, apologized to his children with a sincerity that surprised Natalia. While she maintained appropriate boundaries, she allowed him to begin rebuilding a relationship with Alina and Marek through supervised visits during his recovery. "I don't expect your forgiveness," he told Natalia during a private moment. "I don't deserve it, but thank you for being better than me, for giving our children what I was too selfish to provide." Natalia studied the man she had once loved, noting the grey at his temples and the lines around his eyes, evidence of years that had been less kind to him than to her. "I forgave you long ago, Boris, not for your sake, but for mine. Bitterness would have poisoned everything I've built." By the time Boris was released from the hospital, an understanding had been reached. He would have a place in their children's lives if he proved reliable and respectful of boundaries. Natalia felt no desire to reconcile romantically. That chapter was firmly closed, but she recognized the importance of family connections, having seen how her own support network had been crucial to her success. 7 years after being left with nothing, Natalia stood at the podium of an international business forum in Brussels, addressing delegates from across Europe about sustainable rural development. Her story of transforming personal crisis into community renewal captivated the audience, many of whom had dismissed small-scale artisanal businesses as quaint but economically insignificant. "The future of our economies isn't just in gleaming tech hubs and financial centers," she told them. "It's also in the hands of women in villages and small towns, preserving cultural knowledge while creating sustainable livelihoods. Traditional doesn't mean backward. It can be the foundation for innovation that honors human dignity and environmental responsibility." As she concluded her speech to enthusiastic applause, Natalia caught sight of Alina and Marek in the audience, their faces shining with pride. Now 12 and 10, they had grown into thoughtful, confident children who understood both their roots and their potential. Beside them sat several women from the cooperative, who had traveled to Belgium to represent their products at the accompanying trade exhibition. The journey from abandoned wife to celebrated entrepreneur had transformed not only Natalia's life, but an entire community. Through resilience, creativity, and unwavering determination, she had converted personal tragedy into triumph, proving that sometimes the greatest gift can be the opportunity to discover your own strength. That evening, at a reception following the forum, Natalia was approached by the Polish Minister of Economic Development, who had attended her presentation. "We would like you to lead a new national initiative," he said, "to create similar cooperatives in 50 villages across Poland. Your model works, and we need to replicate it before more rural communities disappear." The offer was tempting, but Natalia didn't rush to accept. "I'm honored," she replied, "but my success came from understanding the specific needs and talents of my community. Each village would need to find its own path, based on its own traditions and resources." "Exactly," the minister nodded. "We don't want you to impose a template, but to mentor local leaders in finding their own solutions. Poland needs more women like you, women who can see possibility where others see only problems." After consulting with her team and her children, Natalia accepted the role on a part-time basis, allowing her to maintain her leadership of Babcia's legacy while sharing their approach with other communities. The national program, called Roots to Wings, quickly gained international attention as a model for rural development that honored cultural heritage while creating economic opportunity. 8 years after Boris walked out, claiming his family was holding him back, Natalia's approach to business and community development was being studied in universities and implemented by governments. The village that had been slowly dying now hosted regular tour groups of international development experts, academics, and politicians, eager to understand the Natalia method, as it had come to be known. Boris, who had relocated to Krakow to be closer to his children while respecting Natalia's boundaries, worked as a consultant for small businesses, having finally found fulfillment in helping others succeed rather than pursuing his own ambitions at any cost. He never remarried, and while he and Natalia maintained a cordial relationship focused on co-parenting, both recognized that some bridges, once burned, cannot be rebuilt. The academy Natalia had founded graduated its 5th cohort of students, many of whom returned to their own communities to establish smaller versions of Babcia's legacy. These satellite cooperatives, while independent, maintained connections to the original, creating a network of mutual support and knowledge sharing that stretched across Poland. In the original village, what had begun with one desperate mother trying to feed her children had evolved into a thriving ecosystem of businesses, educational initiatives, and cultural preservation projects. The population had doubled as young families moved in, attracted by the quality of life and economic opportunities. The school, once at risk of closing, now needed an expansion to accommodate new students. 10 years after being abandoned with nothing but her skills and determination, Natalia stood in the center of the village square, surrounded by hundreds of people gathered to celebrate the unveiling of a new community center funded by cooperative profits. The modern building, constructed with traditional materials and techniques, would house expanded childcare facilities, a library, workshop spaces for emerging artisans, and a museum dedicated to Polish textile arts. As she cut the ribbon across the entrance, with Alina and Marek, now teenagers, standing tall beside her, Natalia reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. The pain of abandonment had become the foundation for something beautiful and enduring, not just a business, but a community reborn. "This center belongs to all of us," she told the assembled villagers, her voice strong and clear in the autumn sunshine. "It is built on our shared belief that when we support each other, when we honor our traditions while embracing new possibilities, there is nothing we cannot achieve together." The applause that followed was punctuated by the laughter of children playing in the square, the sound of a village with a future. Natalia's eyes met those of her team members scattered throughout the crowd, women who had walked this journey with her through countless challenges and triumphs. Their silent exchange acknowledged a shared truth, that in reaching out to lift each other, they had all risen higher than any could have imagined. That evening, as twilight settled over the village, Natalia sat on the porch of her home, the same cottage from which Boris had stormed out a decade earlier, now lovingly renovated, but still modest in size. She watched fireflies emerge in the garden, where Alina was teaching younger children from the village to make flower crowns, a traditional skill passed down through generations. A decade after the coldest winter of her life, Natalia had built not just a business, but a legacy of resilience, community, and hope that would outlast her. The woman who had once been defined by abandonment was now known for what she had created rather than what she had lost. In the face of cruelty, she had chosen kindness. In response to rejection, she had built connection. When faced with scarcity, she had cultivated abundance not just for herself, but for all around her. As stars appeared in the darkening sky, Natalia smiled at the realization that in losing what she thought she needed, she had found what she was meant to become. Congratulations. Type 9 in the comments so that I know you stayed until the end with me. Thank you for watching, and until tomorrow's story on this same channel.